age. And now we're moving into the constellation of Aquarius, which then they're talking about the age of Aquarius. So it's based upon time, celestial time and space, relative to our sun and our solar system. Again, this is all in the context that the solar system is like a molecule. And so then as the macrocosm, or the greater celestial environment, which is an energy force, then influences a smaller energy force. And so then as we then shift to a different celestial season, it will have a different climatic and psychological effect on all those things in this sphere. Yes.
How does that relate to what they call the great central sun?
They say that our sun, the orbit of the great year of 26,000 years, is also orbiting around its central sun. It's supposedly in the constellation of Sagittarius. So, yeah, because everything is orbiting around a greater cycle. Just like the first we did a slide presentation showing how our solar system within the Milky Way galaxy is also orbiting around a greater center. And then that galaxy, if you keep blowing it out, it's orbiting around with other galaxies around a greater cosmic, and you can keep going infinitely. At the same time, you can go down microcosmically down to atoms, and then atomic particles, etc. And so basically, that's the law of the universe. It operates on cycles. Okay. The precession of the equinoxes. This is the name that is given to the gradual change of place, which is constantly going on as the point where the sun each year crosses the celestial equator. That's what I'm talking about. That point where the sun crosses the celestial equator, where they intersect. The sun does not cross at the same place each year. On the contrary, each time when the sun completes the circuit of the zodiac, it crosses the equator at a point a small distance back of the place where it did the previous year. It basically travels 1 degree every 72 years. It's going back 1 degree every 72 years. It's something like, I believe, so many seconds per year.
So does it make it 360 eventually? Does it make it 360?
Yeah, it takes about 26,000 years. And it goes all the way around in a total orbit and back to the same point again. And at 26,000 years, the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac will realign themselves. So that's basically when they talk about the precession of the equinox that they're talking about. And then those cycles determine, as we talked about last session, 3 weeks ago now, determine or have influence or determine the major religious themes of that age. And the handouts we gave our last time, we talked about the age of Pisces, the rule of the fish, symbolism of Christianity being the fish, and the attributes of the savior of that period, or the avatar. Avatar is the bringer of light, celestial light consciousness, the knowledge, takes on the clothing of the age from which it is expressing itself or existing. Basically what they do is they just articulate the universal truth clothed in the myth and the story and the characteristics of the new age that they're in. Because people stray, so they always have to have new prophets, new seers, new master teachers to come back to the masses to try to realign their thinking, their consciousness with the proper order of the universe as on earth as in heaven, all these kind of things. So.
And it really happens without choice.
When you say it happens, what happens without choice?
Once you get into the age and the symbols that are used and the information that is given to the masses, it's almost automatic.
What is automatic?
The information.
The message that is given?
Yeah, the message.
No. Universally, from the beginning of human consciousness, there has always been a special class of men and women whose responsibility is to study and master the spiritual truths and reality. You call them medicine men, you call them, mediums, you call them priests, priestesses. Their job was to keep the community in tune, both in terms of their personal life, but also in terms of the collective, in tune with God or the greater universe. And so they understood these dynamics, these principles. And then usually what they would do is that there would be those who are so advanced that they actually send them out to articulate and be an example for the new dispensation. So they already know when they go out, they already know what's going to be in store for them, because it's always the same. Anytime any new person comes out and starts to articulate the new dispensation, those who are still wedded to the old dispensation will eventually crucify them. It's always been true. Because if you look at all the great lights that come out in the beginning of an idea, they're always persecuted. But then later on, the idea is held up to be the greatest thing that has ever been. When you look at the life of the one that brought that idea, in his time or her time, they were persecuted and usually became a martyr. Because at the beginning of a change, people resist change. It's only after so many repetitions and so many changes do it actually, become the norm.
So what I'm saying is that person, that martyr, actually he has no choice but he's elevated to that position, that's his responsibility, and no matter how he resists, he's going to be the mission.
But isn't that his choice? Isn't that his choice, though, isn't it?
It's always choice. And I understand what you're saying, too. Because once you move to a higher level of consciousness, you really don't have any choice but to articulate the truth. Once you move there. Now, if you are there where you are not, you know the truth and are not going to articulate the truth, you haven't moved to that level yet. Because the truth is supreme. The only thing that would keep you from not articulating the truth is that you are still tied to the mundane world and have fears and anxieties about whatever. Whatever. Either people are not going to like you, or they're going to persecute you, or kill you, or whatever it may be. But it keeps you from speaking the truth. That's like when people like Martin and Malcolm, they moved to a level where they went beyond fear and can speak the truth regardless of the consequences. Because they had transcended the whole of the lower plane of emotions and the physical body and the lower mind that really keeps most of us from really being who we really are.
Well, we got to define that freedom of choice type of thing. Is that a misnomer or something, or what? I mean, if we move into a position where we are compelled to do something and have to do something, living in this truth, and the responsibility of that, you're saying we can't go back
Don't know.
to the way we behaved before, or...
No, I didn't say that. You can. Okay, it's like this. The truth is like you have to eat to live. You have the choice not to eat. You have that choice. But for you to take that option means that you're very stupid and foolish.
Taking what option? Eating or not eating?
Not eating. You have the choice to eat or not to eat.
It would be foolish only if I desire to live. That would be foolish.
Why would you desire not to live?
By not eating?
No, why would you desire not to live?
Me? I don't know. Other people can make that choice. Some people have made the choice not to eat anymore and desire to fast.
But see, the point that I'm making is that, and that's a part of the present day downfall, in that man or the present humanity has mistakenly elevated his own ego beyond the submission to cosmic law. See, there are laws that are higher than your thinking. And so then the laws of the universe were here before you and will be here after you, and they are the things that created you. So the wise one then gets in tune with those laws. And so once you know the law and really understand the law, then you always have choice in terms of humans, but you really don't have choice if you're moving toward fulfilling what you're really all about.
So what is it?
Go ahead.
When you say cosmic law, you mean natural law?
Cosmic, universal, the laws of the universe.
Natural law.
Right. The laws upon which the universe is based. Creation.
You say cosmic, you mean natural law when they talk, when the Supreme Court justice talked about natural law. You talking about that?
No.
Not that. Okay.
See, their reference point,
No.
what is their reference point that defines natural? Is it
That's right.
a universal law, or have they interpreted that relative to their own experience? From what I've seen, based upon, they interpret it. I'm going back in terms of how if you look at all the major philosophical systems, the religious systems, underneath those systems was a standard set of ethical codes and laws. I'm saying that.
You're talking about cosmology, not philosophy, like the law. Like you got
not civic law, not jurisprudence and all that. No, I'm talking about law from a more of a, just like the laws upon which the sun and orbits in the heavens. That's to me cosmic law. Okay.
I wanted to define the free will, free choice issue a bit more. Back to eating. You have to eat to live. Okay,
Right.
we understand that. The
Right.
choices is that you can eat good food or bad food. You may not live well. The one choice, the other choice, you could live well.
Right.
So you within that particular realm of choice that you have, but yet you still would have to eat to live. So if this is an example of how you're talking about you do have a choice and don't have a choice, that type of way, I'm looking at it a very, mundane analogy, I know, but
I guess the point I'm making is that I'm saying you're correct in what you're saying, that there is always choices there.
yeah, all right.
You do have that choice. But in her statement is once one becomes knowledgeable in terms of the positive and negative consequences of their choice, and once one moves to a spiritual level of consciousness, they really don't have choice.
So they give up free will. Free will is given up.
That
You
is
don't
the will.
give, yeah, right, that's right. They're not giving up free. They're willfully choosing to obey a higher order.
That's what I said when I first interjected, that they make that choice.
Right, that's right. Humans always have choice.
So your free will is still intact, though.
Right.
Because you make the
You're
choice.
choosing
Right.
to abide with the universal laws as opposed to choosing to go against them.
Right.
Then you have no choice.
But you are choosing. That's
You are
the choice
choosing.
that you're making.
You're
Yeah, unless you're chosen.
I guess you're getting caught up in the statement where I said you really don't have choice. But see, that's a qualitative statement relative to once a person has crossed a certain threshold and recognizes the greater and has really become to identify with the greater, then you have choice, but you really don't have choice. It's almost like if you're truly committed to the liberation of black people, heart and soul committed, then you always have choice, but based upon your commitment, you don't have any choice but to keep struggling and try to make that become a reality. If you really are truly committed to that, which means if everybody else turns their back, everybody else denies it, and you say you believe it,
Okay, all right then.
I still got to do it.
As you're saying, that you're being guided by something within than by what appears to be outside.
Right.
You're actually guided by that.
Right.
I see. Okay, now thank you. That clarifies it better.
Yeah.
When we speak of universal law, is this beyond or in denial of a God or God's consciousness, or is this just elevating to that?
The universal law is the operation of God. Because basically from my perspective in school and the inner, God is not a personality. It is the wholeness of all the forces upon which creation is based. And all the dynamics and laws upon that govern creation is what the God principle is all about.
That's what they consciousness.
Right.
Hierarchy of forces.
Okay. We're back here. We're on the social points. Okay, these are the equinoctial points marked by Aries and Libra. The social points are those marked by Cancer and Capricorn. So we're talking about the four gates of Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. Now, it's evident that when the sun leaves Aries or the vernal equinox, this pathway is continuously upward until he reaches Cancer and there attains his highest point north of the celestial equator as well as that of the Earth. This is the summer solstice. Again, look at the description of the activity, because we're going to go back and look at the Christ myth from the context of the description of the change of the sun in its relationship in his orbit. So it talks about how at the equal day and equal night at Aries, and then it starts to move upward from Aries and the vernal equinox, continuously upward until it reaches the highest point, which is Cancer, or the summer solstice. Then leaving Cancer in the summer solstice, which is in the north, it starts to decline down toward the south, descending through, it says Leo and Virgo, which are the signs, it gets to Virgo until it reaches Libra on the 23rd of September, around that, which is the autumnal equinox, another equal day and equal night. From this point on, the sun continues to descend through Scorpio and Sagittarius until the winter solstice reach at Capricorn, December 23rd, really around 21st, 22nd, when the sun has reached its lowest southerly declination. Then declination is north and south of the celestial equator. He is now just as far south of the celestial equator as he was north in the summer solstice. From Capricorn, the sun begins to ascend through Aquarius and Pisces until the vernal equinox is again reached. These four cardinal points, the two solstital together with the vernal and autumnal equinox, are therefore indicative of the four seasons of the year. For when the sun reaches the vernal equinox, spring begins. When he advances to the tropic of Cancer, the summer begins. His arrival at the other equinox point at the advent of autumn, and when at last he reaches the tropic of Capricorn, winter begins. We kind of missed that. Went back to the. I'm not going to talk about that. You can read this. I want to give you another handout. I want to give you talk about hemisphere when the sun is at its lowest southerly point. Now, if we were in the southern hemisphere, it would be opposite.
I know it's just the opposite because below the equator, June is the coldest spot.
Right, because it's the opposite, because we talked about how, in the other handout, talked about how this is the sun, and you have the orbit around the sun. This is Aries, this is Libra. If this is probably the way. Here when here is just like this. So this is the northern hemisphere. So in the summer, the northern hemisphere is facing, because the angle of the celestial pole, not straight, it's at an angle about 23 to 30 degrees. So when it's facing summer, the northern hemisphere is facing closer to the earth. And in the winter, the northern hemisphere is facing further away from the earth. So then if this is December, which is winter, down in the south, this part is facing closer to the earth. So it'll be summer. And then it'd be vice versa. Over here, when this is closer, the southern hemisphere is further away, so it'll be winter. So when summer up here, it's winter down there. That's based upon an angle.
Something curious to know here. Now, in the southern hemisphere, well, I guess, in the southern hemisphere, when we evolved and became, black, it's because we were closer to the sun?
It's because that's the tropics. See, the zone between the tropical Cancer and tropical Capricorn is the tropical belt. If you follow that belt all the way around the equator, that's where dark-skinned people and really the heaviest population occurred, in the tropics.
So why didn't white people develop in a extreme southern end of the... Oh, there's no landmass. Okay.
Right.
There's no landmass.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the Earth, the majority of the landmass goes to the north. The southern is more water. It's interesting because you could get into some correlations there in terms of it's less material and more material. And the consciousness was less material, more material.
There you go.
And there are energetic dynamics or characteristics that are reflected in the civilizations in those regions.
That didn't make the earth heavy and move tilt to one about us, right?
No.
Africa is the most southern country, I think.
Okay, this next piece comes out of a book called The Pulse of Life by Dane Rudyard, or Rudyard, I call him Rudyard, Rudyard. Yeah, basically what it talks about is the energetic. See, the astrology, most people look at astrology, when we study astrology, we don't study it from just reading charts and your sun sign and all that. That's like a side, it's like a side. In actuality, the 12 signs of the zodiac are energetic. I think I talked about that before. Right. And basically what he talks about is how the 12 signs of the zodiac are made up of 3 qualities. And what are those qualities? Those of us that have been here before. The 3 qualities. This is tell to see if people know what I'm talking about. See, sometimes I think because I've covered it, I kind of take advantage and people remember what I might be taking too much advantage. So what are the 3 qualities?
Cardinal, fixed, and mutable.
Cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Somebody got his notes to what? No, you got it. Cardinal, fixed, and mutable.
I've been going so long.
Okay, so this is like initiating, this is like sustaining, and this is like transforming. This is the dialectical process of action, reaction, and synthesis. Everything that exists because of these 3 modes of operation: action, reaction, and synthesis. Or you can say Father, Mother, and Child. The Trinity. Which is the trine. Right? The 3. Then you have 4 elements.
That's the 4 elements.
Which are
Air,
fire, earth, air, and water, which is the square. This is 3, this is 4. 3 times 4 equals 12. 3 plus 4 equals 7. And the physical world is really based upon a 7-fold factor. 7 levels, 7 notes, 7 colors. 4 times 7 is 28, the basic phase of the moon. 7 sonnets. Right. So these are principles upon which the universe operates. They're immutable laws, regardless of where you live, consciousness, or whatever. And so then and then you also have the 1. The 1 is the whole cycle itself, which is a whole 360. The 2 is divided into half, and then you have positive and negative, or masculine and feminine. Then you have 3, and then you have 4. If you add up 1, 2, 3, and 4, you get 10, which equals 1. This next session is going to be with geometry and number. We get back into some of this. But if you, again, this is important because if you start talking about deciphering philosophies and religions and ancient symbolism, the ancients operated off of this awareness and they incorporated these patterns into the philosophical and religious systems and into the symbolism. So once you start to understand these things, they start talking about 40 tribes or 40s. You can start having some understanding of what they're talking about. 40 is really the period of gestation, right? Because how long does it take for a child to be born? 40 weeks. And that's 40, which is really 10 times 4. And so if 4 are the 4 levels, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, those are 4 dimensions, and 10 is a whole cycle. So 10 whole cycles then produces a new human being. And then when they were in 40 days in the desert, that's a period of gestation. A transition from one state to another. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And it moved from one dispensation to another. That was a transition point from one to another. A period of gestation for the new birth of something.
Are there more? 40 days?
Yeah, there's different ones. I haven't remembered,
Moses?
Right? Moses' name is he who was saved through water. And that was a title for one who had been initiated. All those who had went through a purification process, the first level of purification was, first level of initiation was water purification. The baptism. That's the first phase of going through the process of elevating your consciousness to a spiritual state. Because to be able to elevate yourself to a spiritual state, you have to first purify your emotional body. Water, feelings, emotions. So the baptism through the water is then gaining control of your emotions. Because if you can't gain control of your emotions, if you start gaining this cosmic knowledge, you then will start to use that knowledge in a very detrimental and selfish way.
This is so universal that even the Dogon called Nomo, master of the water.
Right.
What were the 4 dimensions? 4 dimensions.
4 dimensions?
Yeah.
You're talking about the 4 planes, right? Well, you say the dot, the line, the plane,
Okay.
and the cube,
Cube.
right? The solid. Drawing crazy. But those are the 4 dimensions.
Cube.
Physical, emotional, mental, and spirit. Fire. Water, well really is earth is physical, water is emotional, air is mental, and fire is really intuitional. Because the way one really connects with their spiritual self is the intuitive mind. So then when you add these together, the 3 modes of operation of the Trinity, which is really the Godhead or the creative power, operate through these 3 forces and utilize these 4 elements to build things from. Because all life really can be put into these 4 elements, which I think is nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. We have 4 main elements, and if you combine all those elements together, it makes the majority of all the elements on the periodic table. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have a question. You said the physical was earth, right?
Right. Water is emotional, air is mental, and fire is intuitional or spiritual.
So you see,
Yes.
that's just something. Maybe it's not part of the video.
Okay.
You show off the 12 signs. Show which one's fire, which one's earth, which one's air.
That's what
the water.
Okay. What I was trying to show you that astrology itself, it originally is a philosophy and how these various cosmic forces interact with each other. And then we go back to the handout. So basically you have 4 elements, right? So you have where water is on top of earth, And fire and air go together, because air and fire go up, water and earth are down. So they're compatible. You mix fire and water, water put out the fire boil the water. Earth smothers fire or it gets scorched.
Now you said cardinal, fixable, and mutable was same as synthesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
It's the same as theses, antithesis, and synthesis. The dialectical process, action, reaction, and synthesis. Right. All those are just different variations of the same operating principles. Okay, y'all got this? I'm talking about if I can erase this. I'll put it all together. You can see the whole thing. Positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. So you have an opposition, right? You have opposites happening. Then you have cardinal, fire. Then you have all the earth signs 120 degrees. Air and fire are opposites. Well, they're opposites, but they're really complementary because they're on each side of one another. They're both positive. Like cardinal fire and cardinal air, they're both positives. So they make up each side of a whole. So then the opposite signs, fire and earth, are next to each other. And then earth and air, so you have them that are separated by a opposite, which so both earth and water are feminine or receptive, both fire and air are masculine or assertive. So anyway, what I'm saying is really bring it to the zodiac is secondary in how it's used for birth horoscopes and all that. Primarily, it's an actual blueprint of how the energies in the universe interact with each other. And it's based upon, literally, upon the seasonal changes of the sun. So from that, now we can go to this.
Astronomy, not astrology.
Astronomy and astrology. Ancient times, astronomy and astrology were wedded. It was only when the European came, he separated religion away from science. So he can look at something that doesn't have any meaning, it's just
Separation of church and state,
So that's how they could go and chop down trees in the forest and say, oh, that's just over there.
Oh, yeah.
And don't see it's all interconnected. Because they separate, that's how they can see people starving and don't do anything about it because that's over there. They've separated the connection and the meaning between things and being.
Yeah, that's right.
So we can get into why that is. So on this sheet, page 24, I'll start at the third paragraph on page 24. The study of the zodiac will teach us, first of all, that while there are always two forces in operation in every situation, every experience, understanding and decision are never a matter of either or, but of more or less. This is a critical point right here. There was a debate today on TV, discussing, they're going this whole thing about interracial marriage and mixed kids, and who are you? Either or. It's not an either or, it's more or less. It's a dynamic. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What culture, but they got us thinking either or. And it's not either or. Either you're right or you're wrong. Either you're up or you're down or whatever. And that's that thinking that constantly keeps people separated. Well, I'm not a tree, so that's over there and I'm over here.
Right.
But it's more or less. It's relative. That's on a scale. We're all interconnected on the scale. And we talked about the electromagnetic spectrum. Everything is interconnected based on energy. We're just at different frequencies on a continuum. So we're all connected. So it says there is dualism, but the dualism of a dynamic process in which both opposites constantly interpenetrate and transform each other. It's like the symbol of the Tao, the yin and the yang. So you have the dark, or the yin, which is the dark, or the receptive, or the feminine. And then you have the yang, which is the sun and moon, masculine and feminine. But you never have all of, in nature, you never have all of one thing. There's always this opposite is inside of that thing. It's nothing just pure masculine, pure feminine. Because within it, it has to have some of its opposite so it can maintain some kind of balance. And so inside is apparent dominance of the unconscious or the dark, you have aspects of the light. And within the context of just the pure light, you have aspects of the dark. It says, because of this, no entity or no experience is either good or bad, constructive or destructive, light or dark. Everything is in everything. What changes is the proportion in which the combination occurs. In order to understand what the combination is and to be able to give it a valid meaning, the several components of every experience must be measured. Remember we had the discussion talking about thinking, the two ways of thinking? Who remembers when we talked about the two ways of thinking? Nobody? Have to bring that lesson back.
Left brain and right brain?
In a certain sense, yeah, that's going there. But what would be the characteristics of the right brain thinking and left brain thinking?
Right brain is spiritual and
Intuitive.
yeah.
Creative.
Left
Those are
brain
good words.
Left brain is linear, right brain
is
is
separatism,
Okay.
segregation.
Okay. Okay. So then we talked about the lower mind that's like linear, that just looks at specific facts and then makes an either or decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk about the higher mind that's dialectical, which means it has to bring in the interplay of there's always another side to the situation. And so you have to bring in the whole picture before you really, or you should, I don't think you have to, but you should bring in all the facts before you make your mind up.
Mm-hmm.
Look at it from a holistic perspective and not just from one perspective. I said he was just talking about the same thing. So it says these experiences, they can be measured in terms of their relative place within the boundaries of the whole. Again, look at the key words. The meaning of something can be measured in terms of their relative place within the boundaries of the whole. And we're talking about astronomy. This is the concept of astronomy. So we're talking about whole cycles. So the meaning of the event is determined by the place within the cycle. So do you know where you are within the cycle? That's why I asked you, do you know what time it is? Next session we're going to deal with the moon cycle, and then the following session we're going to deal with the personal cycle. You have a cycle, a pattern and a cycle in your life, and you have phases in your life. So do you understand what phase you're in terms of your life cycle? Because different phases is like different seasons in your life. And certain things occur, like in spring as opposed to winter. And so if you don't understand what season you're in your life, you're not going to be able to cultivate the appropriate behavior. Do you even know that life is a cycle and got phases? Some people live like they ain't no tomorrow. Whatever I do today it ain't going to have no consequences. Which is really a major problem with our young people. Because young people don't understand that youth is a phase and a cycle. They think that this is it. But because of that thinking, they then don't make appropriate plans today that then will help them in the future. They many times make decisions today that disable them for the future. Because they don't think in terms of cycles. Because we don't even teach that, that you go through cycles of life and different phases. And there's certain things that are appropriate for different phases of your life. But that'll be week after next. But the point I was raising is the point here, is that you measure the meaning of the validity of the meaning is relative to the place within the boundaries of the whole. Civilization goes, when we talk about civilization goes through cycles. Civilizations have birth, they have sustainment, and then they have change and transformation when they die. Products. You know, if you're in the market, you talk about the life cycle of a product. You need to understand what phase the product is in, because that determines how you market the product. All these things. But what I'm just saying is how they've taken these concepts and have applied them to a very materialistic operation. Well, probably more than that. But we don't apply these concepts for our own benefit. Because we don't operate from this. We're very reactive now. We're not operating from a whole perspective.
We as black people?
We as black people.
Reactive.
But basically because we're ignorant. See, this now, when you made the question, in traditional society, there was always a body of individuals who had the responsibility of preserving this knowledge and passing it on to the next generation. We have given up that responsibility to the dominant society. And that's why we no longer have social cohesion. Because we no longer have the responsibility to pass on the accumulated wisdom to the next generation. So thus they just get whatever people want to give them. And so until we re-establish that capacity, we will never be free. Sure. Yeah.
This may be off the wall. I still try to find out why was our grandparents, they were much wiser than we were. They just come out of bondage. How in the world does that happen?
They were more separated, so they were more pure.
My grandparents had great kids, they had much wisdom, and you have to do everything.
They were still connected to nature, though. Now we live on concrete, we drive in steel, you know, we're disconnected from cycles. They still understood cycles and natural order, and, you know, back then, you know, we had to base our existence on our own knowledge. So the slave master didn't do that for us. So but that enabled us to preserve our own knowledge. When we went into integration, then, you know, all those systems broke down. You know, like I came here, my parents just put me in school, didn't follow up, just, you know, gave me to the system. You know, they'll raise you, they'll give you the knowledge, you'll be smart. And we lost all that. Right. Well, when they went to school, you know, they had to get their own school, they had to have support systems, they had to come back home, they built a farm, and they passed stories down. My parents didn't want to tell me all the stuff they went through. They wanted to spare me from all that, you know.
You know, they built so many institutions in the South, hospitals, universities. We don't do anything.
Right. We're striving to get jobs now.
Because I'm an old man, you know.
I understand. Well, right.
But I just wonder how we built so much in the South, you know. Had so much land, and now we have. Well, you said
it's the same thing that's happening in Africa. You know, you got African countries that have all this fertile land and don't even produce enough food for themselves because they're producing cash crops to sell to the Europeans who ship it back to them at exorbitant prices.
Right, I know, I did that.
Because we're caught up with the concept of modern living is these baubles and glitter and glamour. We think that is what civilization is, and we've really lost the true value of what civilization is.
Because they were telling me most of the young people they revert back to the old African system. That's what they tell me they must do.
The ones in Africa?
Yeah, I was there, you know, they were telling me they got to revert back to all those old traditions and extended family and get away from the music. And they said they would do this when the young people take over. This is what they say.
Okay. So then it says here, back to they can be measured in terms of their relative intensity, and the intensity of any factor depends mostly upon the moment of its cycle at which it operates, whether it represents the spring or winter of that cycle, whether it is young or old, is in its waxing or waning phase. That's why the ancients could prophesy, because they understood cycles. And they know at the beginning of a cycle, you're going to have all kinds of changes. Because anything tries to get born, it goes through, you know, like when women you have Braxton Hicks and all these contusions, your body's trying to get ready to give birth. Well, what's true for the human is true for the universe. And so as a civilization tries to go through the rebirthing process, it's going through all these changes. We're at the changeover or the spring of a new dispensation. And so they knew that when, they told you when you go and see the man with the picture, you follow him into the upper room, that's Aquarius. And as that time comes, they talk about the sons and we fight the daughters and the fathers and all this. They knew at the end of an age, all these things occur. Because things operate within the phase of cycles. And so if you then study cycles and understand the phase of cycles, you can, well, it's just like the stock market or whatever. They do the same thing. But it's usually on a more materialistic perspective as opposed to a more macrocosm or spiritual perspective. By enthroning the more or less concept in the place of the either or, man can completely renew his attitude to life. An experience which in the mind of the experiencer is good and is not bad leads only to conflict and to bondage. If understood as a combination of more light than darkness, the experience can be referred to the entire cycle in which the two forces, light and darkness, are constantly interacting. Which means if you understand that if you're in a dark period of your life, that's not going to be forever. Right. There's going to be a light time is going to come too. So then you don't get fatalistic. Right. Like, ain't nothing I can do, it's all this.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, that attitude thing is so important. That's why the philosophy is the critical element. Because once you change the thinking, you change the reality. The whole cycle can thus be seen at the core of the partial experience. And man can operate as creator of meaning. Oh, okay. You had the Greeks came on the set, Alexander. You had Alexandria. Then you had the birth of Christianity. Then you had the Roman Empire. Then you had the close of the African religions and the promotion of Catholicism. Then you went into the Dark Ages. Then you had the rise of the Moorish empires, and then you had the civilization of Europe. And then at the same time you had the Golden Age of Africa. And then you had the Europeans coming out of Europe down into Africa. Then you had the slave trade. But this is like toward the end of that cycle. So that means in actuality, the slave experience, the diaspora, is the last phases of a whole cycle.
So it's a big transformation.
And if you get into and I'm not going to go into that, but if you get into the main themes of the Piscean age, which really deals with breaking things down into their more universal components, and you look at the African American experience and who we really represent the universal. Because we are all bloodlines. I mean, they got us hung up in the black and white thing. But in reality, we're all. So if you take it, on one sense you can take it from as negative, but if you take it from as positive, well, what does that really mean? That means we represent the new.
In other words, we represent history.
Future.
Now we represent the new.
Because he's all sufficient.
We represent the new.
New phase, new cycle.
New cycle.
Right, we're a synthesis. And the age of Aquarius is the age of synthesis. Which means we really are the body to usher in the new dispensation. Once we really become conscious of our role or our place within the greater cycle. We're already doing it unconsciously because, African American culture is really global. The global popular culture is really African American culture in terms of style and music and language, and the whole flavor is African American. But we only influence it to the level that we're conscious. If we can raise our level of consciousness, we can then influence global culture to the level that our minds evolve to.
Because they will fall.
Right. They do it anyway. Even though they say they hate black people, they're always trying to be like us.
So we can really lead them at a higher level.
It's up to us.
Everywhere, when I went around the world, everywhere I went in Asia, oh, they love black Americans. Oh, we really studied the truth. Oh, they liked everything we did and music. I mean, this is Asian over you too.
They do it too, though. They deny it outwardly, but they do it.
I was so surprised. The Indian girls, oh man, they came, oh, I was causing this, and they talk about all the black people. You're right.
Right. But that puts a heavy responsibility on us. But nature gives you nothing you can't achieve. That's a law. So anything you confront in your life, you have the capacity to deal with it. Because nature doesn't give you anything you can't handle. Now, the only thing that keeps you from handling it is your own thinking.
Yeah.
Nature doesn't give you anything you can't handle.
So you say Aquarius versus
Aquarius, age of Aquarius is the new. The key word is I know, knowledge. And so you look at what is the new order, is the order, the knowledge worker, information age, information knowledge, that whole thing, But let's continue on with this. There's another point I want to get to. So every phase of the zodiacal process, every sign of the zodiac represents a state of human experience in which more or less of two basic forces are active. These forces, universal and protean as they are, can be given any number of names. Here, however, because of our attempt to reformulate astrology in terms of the simplest common denominator of the human experience, we shall refer to these two cosmic forces in constant interplay throughout the year cycle as the day force and the night force. Such names not only concur with the most ancient terminology of astrology, but they are a natural and logical expression of the fact that during one half of the year, the length of the days increases and the length of the night decreases correspondingly. The reverse process taking place during the other half of the year. So you got dialectic is always operating. It follows that when the days grow longer, the day force, the positive tide of the solar energy is on the increase. Whereas when the days grow shorter and the nights longer, the night force is becoming more powerful while the day force wanes in power. This is a critical understanding because when we start talking about melanin, which absorbs solar and cosmic radiation and then produces hormonal releases of our hormones in proportion or in relationship to the amount of daylight and sunlight that is operating. Also, melanin has the capacity to absorb ultraviolet light and cosmic radiation and translate that energy into useful forms in the body that helps keep the body in balance physically, emotionally, and mentally. So now if you take that to a higher level, that means the changing in the cosmic order is being registered in the melanic portion of the body, which means that it is also activating not only physical changes but psychological to help keep us aligned to the cosmic order. Because melanin is also the doorway to the collective unconscious. And so that means the collective unconscious operates through symbolism, dreams and visions and intuitional flashes. So then if you keep that in line, that means that we are already aligned with the cosmic order. But because we have not been properly educated to the meaning of symbols and various intuitional flashes, we misinterpret the information that is constantly coming to our conscious mind. Because the conscious mind has been conditioned by the contemporary educational system or the media and whatever. So when this information comes to our conscious mind, we then interpret it in the light of how we've been educated or conditioned. So we are misinterpreting the information. So once we then can be re-educated, you don't have to have an external person to decipher things for you or to keep you in contact with the divine order. Because you're always in contact with it.
Right.
Like, yeah, in a sense, psychic, intuitional, yeah.
Yeah, preach.
Because now, you have intermediate, religious preachers and ministers have to interpret the meaning of the time. That's only because we haven't been properly educated, and that's why they closed the mystery schools. Because the mystery schools was teaching this information. Which means that I can't say that God is outside somewhere. It's inside. Which means I have a personal responsibility to follow the higher principles. But then if you do that, I can't control you. Because I want you to go out and fight some wars based upon the way I am interpreting Scripture. Well, if you got your own connection, then you can follow your own mind. Oh, I can't have that. So then we bring in intuition, inquisitions.
Inquisition, reformation.
To persecute all those with contrary thinking so we can purge society of all those free thinkers who are polluting the minds of the youth.
Just remind me of a movie I saw this weekend I wanted to bring up, but I'll talk about it later.
So, back to the day force and night force. By bringing in, I have a next hand, I'll give you a handout on the melanin so you can just get some basic concepts on it. Because it also will give you a foundation for the operation of the different zodiac signs, because the different zodiac signs actually reflect a different combination of light to dark. Which then means it has a different response or reaction on the human organism, because we are really photosynthesizing energy all the time.
Because of melanin?
Well, melanin, but because of the nature, life came out of a plant life. Plant life was first, which is photosynthetic. That created the foundation for animal, and then human. Which human is just a elevated or evolved animal. We're still animals that can think. And so the foundation of life on the planet is photosynthetic. Without that dimension, we couldn't exist.
That's right.
Right. That's right. And the photosynthetic process of the chloroform in animals or in plants is translated in humans through the melanin. Melanin plays the same role in us as photosynthesis plays in plant life. Well, because we're thinkers, then it's also more complex and is elevated also to a psychomental level along with the biophysical level. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Astronomy in the Bible it says, "If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of the Father. Set your affection on things above, not on things of the earth." But what is that talking about?
Well, we went back. Remember, we did this here. You have the square, right? The square, what is the symbolism for the earth? It's the square, right? The four. So you have physical, energetic, emotional, and mental. Or the four elements, right? Of fire, physical, emotional, earth, fire, water, and air. Then you have the higher, which really relates to the will or divine will. You have the, what they call wisdom or intuition. And then you have what they call active intelligence or higher mental. Higher mental is when the difference between lower mental and higher mental is when you just think about, I got to move this chair, I got to go pay my bills, I got to cook dinner, I got to put my clothes on. That's lower mental. Higher mental is when you're thinking about abstract things, the meaning of life or philosophical concepts or religion or art. You're trying to figure out greater kind of concepts that elevate your mind. That's higher mental. Intuitional, of course, is actually you being in tune with your inner divine self. So the higher, this is the higher. This is the higher self. This is the lower self. So the lower self is the lower or the earthly man, and the higher self is the heavenly. So when he's talking to you, and Christ is the higher wisdom. This is the love wisdom principle. The Christ principle is the love wisdom principle that's operative in us all, or your intuitive self. Because intuitively we understand between good and bad, and what happens, we talk ourselves out of it by our lower mind that's been conditioned. So basically what it's telling you is to base yourself or operate from the higher mind, not the lower mind. This is heaven, this is earth.
So they're not talking about a real concept of heaven.
Well, they're not talking about heaven as a physical place in the sky.
Right.
But it is a physical place in the sky.
That's it, right there.
This is your heaven. Because your consciousness determines your heaven. Because your level of consciousness determines your behavior, which determines the quality of your life, which is energy. You know, every action has an equal opposite reaction. So then if your life is a positive life where you're dealing with creation and goodness and positiveness, then your energy level, your quality of your energy will be positive, and then that's the level you will operate on. That's the level that your spirit will dwell at. If you're down to viciousness and larceny and murder and hate, that's a lower level. So your energy is lower, so then that's the level that your energy will also operate at, which is hell. Yes, sir.
At least I want to share this. I'm not sure this is what Pratt was talking about, but I wanted to know if anyone else saw this. Now that we do this, we read, we have our intuitive mind working a little bit better than what we, somewhat our grandparents have given us, our parents have given us, and we see things differently now. One of the things that Pratt, I'm not sure, me and Pratt had this dialogue about exactly this. Me and Pratt saw a movie called Forrest Gump. Now, what was interesting about it was the story was the Egyptian judgment scene. The whole story was based upon the movie starting off the feather dropping from the sky. When the feather dropped from the sky, the whole purpose of what he was saying was he was going to heaven. Pratt brought some interesting points where when he was a child, he was crippled like Horus. When Horus was in the desert, he was crippled. So when he was coming up, it was two women who nurtured him, his mother and Heperu. It was two women that nurtured him throughout the whole story. Throughout the whole story of the Egyptian mystery system was through the beginning of the movie all the way to the end, where the feather finally flew off because he was being judged, that his heart was pure, that he was correct, and all the things that he was supposed to do in the judgment scene of what they the siren drama, he was fulfilling those things that he was supposed to be doing. But they take stories from out of the mystery and they put it into movies and they make it seem as if they come up with these great ideas, but their stories have been told over and over again.
Right.
So now we're able to see that they've been telling our own story, but we don't realize that they're our stories.
Right. But two things also, it's two things. Some are literal, taking and then just redesigning or put them in their own. But the other one is that these principles are universal principles. They're universal principles. So they are operative in the universe anyway. And because the two women, if you go back into Massey, when he talks about the two women, because I was doing some research and it was talking about there was Eve and then there was Lilith. And he took Lilith out and just left Eve in. Where Eve was the virgin. But then what they said, that came out of the original African societies, which were the ancient societies. You talk about the tribal societies, when the womanhood is two levels of womanhood. Is the woman before puberty, which is a virgin, and the woman after puberty when she can give birth.
Like Mary Magdalene and Mary.
Right. So what I'm saying, universally, dealing with the feminine, there's always two aspects of the feminine. It's the virgin aspect, or the pure side, and then the one that's more promiscuous, which is related to intercourse and having kids and all that. So what I'm saying, these are universal principles. So, and then the theme runs in many myths and many stories all over. Because if you look at life, you will see those same things operative. Now, I'm not saying that's They may have took the judgment seat and rewritten. I don't know. But, you know, the thing I would say, fine, what they're doing then, they're then providing ammunition to help elevate people's consciousness. Because so many people looked at that film. So then what needs to happen then is when people start to reinterpret it from another perspective, it actually gives more value to the other perspective. And the other side of it is we've got to develop our own production capability so we can tell our own story.
That's right. Positive.
Let's keep on with this so we get through with this one.
Okay.
So we said here, we go on to the bottom. It says, whenever there are two forces alternately waxing and waning. Waxing means what? Building up, and waning means going down. So from new moon to full moon is waxing, and from full moon to new moon is waning. And so usually when something is waxing, it is building up, which usually is dealing more with the physical, the experiential side of something, the objective side of something. But on the waning cycle, things are in release, which is more than psychological, mental expressing. So just like when you're a young person, you usually go through a lot of physical stuff in your life, right? You're experiencing all kinds of things and have all kinds of encounters. On your waning side, you're usually giving back because you got skills or whatever it is. You learn your lessons or whatever it is. Cycle, that's the universal pattern of cycles. So now it says, at the winter solstice, Christmas, the day force is at the weakest and the night force at its strongest level. This is the beginning of the zodiacal sign Capricorn. So you see the day force is at its weakest and the night force is at its strongest. Keep these major concepts in your mind, because when we start talking about the mythology, you will be able to see the exact correlation of the myth and the actual astronomical facts. At the spring equinox, around March 21st, the day force, which has increased in strength, while the night force decreased, equals in power. That night force, or day and night force, are equal. And this is the zodiacal sign Aries. At the summer solstice, around June 21st, the day force reaches its maximum energy, and the night force its lowest ebb. This is sign Cancer. And at the fall equinox, around September 1st, the two forces are again equal, the night force having grown stronger ever since the beginning of the summer. And it's at the zodiacal sign Libra, but it's on a waning. So in spring, the sun is gaining power, it's waxing. At the autumnal equinox, the sun is equal day and equal night, but it's waning. I mean, it's going toward lesser light and greater dark. So it's getting weaker. And after the spring equinox, the sun now is dominant, because at the equinox it's equal. So right after the equinox, it becomes dominant. So now it's the head, it's on top. At the vernal equinox, right after the vernal equinox, which is equal, the dark becomes dominant. And so if you start looking at the celebration, the holidays around those four gates, they will reflect the characteristics of the energy that's operating at that time. Because winter, go ahead.
Do all the planets wax again?
Relative to a cycle, yes. Because you're talking about cycles. Yes. The sun has a waxing and a waning relative to its cycle. Because we have winter periods on the earth where you have the ice ages, and then you have periods where it's more balanced, and you have periods where you have a very hot season. But they're on a more, the 26,000 year cycle. It may happen, divided into 4, what's that? 4 and 26 is about what? 8? No, it's like 6, right? 6, 12, 24, right? 6,000 years, right? So, blah, blah, blah. In studying the cycle process, we find difficulty encountering that in determining the starting point of the cycle. In ultimate philosophical analysis, there is no starting point because it's a circle, right? In ultimate, but yet for practical purposes, the mind must select a beginning in order to interpret the significant process in terms of human experience. This selection of a starting point establishes a frame of reference. And any truth is relative to its frame of reference. So to a person who is very racist in his logic, it is logical for them to oppress black people from his frame of reference. So you can't argue with somebody unless you really understand your frame of reference. You have to establish a common frame of reference if you're going to meet agreement. If you don't establish a common frame of reference, you may misinterpret what you're talking about. That's why I say in relationships, you should get together with people and establish, what do you mean by love? What do you mean by love? What do I mean by love? What do I expect? What do you expect? Once you come to that, then you can determine if you can create a balance or not. But people don't even get into that. They say, oh yeah, I love you, but it means different things to both people, and you wonder why it don't work. Because you didn't establish a common frame of reference. So that's why Garvey could work with the Ku Klux Klan. Because based upon a certain frame of reference, they could come to agreement. You don't want us in America, and I don't want to be here. So on that common point, why don't we work together to get me out of here?
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And see, a part of our problem is we become so sensitized that we can work at various levels. We become so either or. That's why our greatest downfall. Let's jump over to the down. Day 4, at the bottom of it says day force and night force. One cannot understand significantly the beginning of any cycle unless one knows the general meaning of the whole cycle. By the very definition of the term cycle, the beginning of a cycle marks also the end of the preceding one. So the end of anything is the beginning of something else. People always think, I'm at the end. Oh, it's over. No. You started something else. So same thing, people say death. Oh, it's over. No, you just start another phase of it being in another dimension. Because energy cannot be created or destroyed, only changed in form. But then, we get emotional about it and we forget all that. That's why in traditional society we celebrate it. Because they know they weren't gone, they just was in another dimension. Beginning is conditioned by end. This is very significant. Beginning is conditioned by end. As a new vegetation is conditioned by the seeds which were the product of the preceding yearly growth. This is so important for us because we are at the beginning of a new cycle. So how are we ending this cycle? We are ending this cycle by constantly, what do I want to say? I think we got this conversation before. I was talking about we have to get over slavery. I didn't say we have to forget it. We have to get over it so we can move forward as opposed to constantly being dragged into the past. If we're constantly being dragged in the past, not to say you forget the past, not to say you don't understand it, but for you to constantly go back and relive it means you keep perpetuating it.
Jews do it all the time.
They don't go back and relive the past. They go back, first of all, it's a gimmick. Because it's a game. It's a game. See, again, they have a bigger program.
It's a market.
And they only give to the public what they want the public to know.
That's right.
But what they give the public is in relationship to a bigger program. We always are reacting right here. You know what I'm saying? We're not doing this relative to a bigger program. We don't operate strategically. Other people operate strategically. That's why they can compromise over here because they know they're going to get this over there. It's because it's based upon a whole.
In other words, they understand the cycle better than we do.
Right. Definitely. But see, they still got some continuity in terms of their religious order. They have an inner circle.
Yeah.
Black people don't have an inner circle.
That's right.
For the whole. We got a lot of little separate groups that's trying to push all this, but in terms of a whole, we don't have that.
We need an inner circle.
And then every time it looks like we're gonna get one,
Let's
they
break it up.
step in and destroy it.
But that's only because the group that makes up that is still not whole.
That's right, that's true.
I said the group that is trying to formulate that still is not operating from a whole. It's still usually operating from a part of the whole, even though it can be very dynamic or whatever. But when we lose the concept or the understanding of the whole, then we set ourselves up for destruction.
So we need
I
the
feel that
council in.
personally, looking at that scenario, they have fractions just as much as we do. But the thing is that we are not that type of people where we're going to go out there and make sure the fraction is divided. Their whole is there because they consciously come together on certain issues.
Right.
You can easily do exactly what they're doing to us that we can do to them or anyone else because they have divisions and disagreements with each other.
You say easily?
What they're doing to us is pretty easy. I mean, so we buy into the program.
Because I'm saying if what they're doing to us is pretty easy, should it then be pretty easy for us to get out of it?
Jack.
It's not that easy. It's not that easy. What they're doing is not easy. It's first of all, it's taking generations to develop the network and the capacity that they have to implement their will.
That's right. And that's power.
And so, you know, like say once you master something, then it's easy. But all the stuff you went through to get to that level was not easy.
Well, there's certain things that they do that we don't do. They have a way of taking care of their problem.
That's the key word, taking care of their problem.
That's right.
We don't see our problems as our problems.
No,
We see our problems as my problems or his problems or whatever.
No, we're going to wait on Jesus to take care of it.
Hey. Yes, sir.
Well, when the Jews, because they have been, I think, been persecuted more than we, maybe you don't agree. The persecution is longer, it's more intense. So maybe this is why they are more into their own program than we are. When you think, but if you look at the history of the Jews, it's worse than what we went through. I think
Worse.
Where did they come from? Where did they come
no,
from?
what I mean, they were expelled from here. They were born here. How many of us were born here?
Drowned.
What is this, Jews?
No, what I mean is that the American Indian went through more than we did. They took everything from here. So what I'm
it's not
saying
either
is,
or.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, because I think you get into who's been oppressed more or whatever.
learn the lesson.
Well, the thing that the Jews have that we don't is they still have continuity of religion,
right.
which means that we were done worse than them. Because it's worse when you take a people's consciousness, their history, and their culture
And their religion.
from them. It's worse.
It was worse than
Some of us are Jews.
And then what? Jews is how many? 3, 4 million, and we 100 million. And still, what is happening today on the continent? And then they are taking our history and using our history as the foundation for their development and oppression of other people.
That's right.
So it's a game. It's the European, because the Jews that are there now are European Jews who took on that religion as a method of empowerment.
Thank you.
It's a game.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Then they went and took the folks' land. Look how they went on and took the folks' land.
On a myth.
That's right.
Talking about the chosen people.
That's right. The land.
Anybody who chooses to raise himself up is the chosen. You choose to be chosen by choosing to behave in accordance with divine law.
So I'm saying they have,
Nothing. But they're not behaving in accordance with divine law.
That's right.
Or being the chosen person.
No, they're not behaving in accordance with divine law. Because how are you going to destroy and kill and say that you are a spiritual people?
Yeah.
Is that what they call themselves?
That's what the whole thing is. That's what it
You
is.
had a question, please?
No, I was going to say too, that we as descendants of Africans in this country anyway have a tendency to, we have many isms within our group, and we see those things as being first, because our commonality is you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we don't have a we.
Christian, you a Muslim,
Right.
and that becomes first.
Right.
So we adopt that before we adopt who we are and what we have in common. We all have life skills, have that in common first, because that's who you were first. You know, before you adopt those other things, religions or whatever.
And then we've been educated into the outer understanding of those religions, to where we allow the outer dress to separate us. What if we all in here, nobody in here is dressed the same? So then I wouldn't talk to this brother because he don't have the same thing I got on. You know what I'm saying? That's the same thing with these religions. But because we haven't been educated to understand this, then we allow that to become a basis for our separation. But we don't understand history. Our main thing is we don't understand history.
Yeah.
If we understood history, we'd understand where we are within a cycle, what this is based upon and all that, it wouldn't be all this confusion. But then who teaches our kids? Who, you know, BET, what's on BET?
That's right. That's right.
Entertaining.
Right, yes, sir.
You know, you said it earlier that our story was not passed down.
Right.
You see what I mean? And it hasn't been passed down because, like, you know, I know my father told me bits and pieces of what he was about. You know what I mean? And I still don't know. You know, he was my father. But I still know there's a whole lot about him I don't even know.
Right.
You see what I mean? So I'm saying that what we have to become now, we have to become, what is it, Astronomy crazy say, griots?
Right.
We have to constantly tell the story.
Right.
For our young people story.
We gotta learn it first, and then we can tell it.
That's
Well,
right.
you know, okay, we learn what we can learn, but still right on, it's just certain things that we take and we have children, the young people, we tell the young people about our life. You see what I mean? So that they know certain things.
And then we have to get more innovative and creative and industrious in multiplying our capacity to reach larger and larger groups of individuals.
Yeah.
You know, we have to really turn our creativity on and come up with creative ways to get the information out.
We have to understand that it's not about African people, the rest of it don't mean
Well, if we can duplicate this in more places, you know what I mean?
We're working on that. If we get students to do their homework and learn it, then they can start teaching classes, and then we just, you know, we're gonna try to get some audio tapes and some video tapes and get into the knowledge broker and send articles into the knowledge broker. People do, if you got a little information, you need to submit articles to the knowledge broker. That's a mechanism to get information out. You know, you need to get it, spread it, and distribute it. All these kind of things.
We say right now, there's several study groups that have spun off this one. This study group, I mean, from KMU, Los Angeles. So it is out there. We're in the cycle.
Really, sir?
Let's finish up here. So,
Okay.
what says day force? The day force is a personalizing energy. It forces ideas, spiritual entities, abstractions into concrete and particular actuality. It energizes the descent of spirit into the body, to use a familiar though dangerous terminology. Thus it begins to grow in power at Christmas, symbol of spiritual incarnation, but becomes only clearly visible in Aries, symbol of germination, and in man of adolescence. It is fulfilled in Cancer, symbol of coming of age, and of personal fulfillment through marriage and home responsibilities. The natural result of the action of day force is the stressing of the individual uniqueness of human beings, which is known today as personality. The night force is an ingathering energy. It brings personalities together. First in Cancer, the home, it integrates a man and a woman. In Leo, it adds a child. And in Virgo, the servants, nurses, educators, etc. But integration becomes public only in Libra, the symbol of social activity, of group activity, toward the building of a cultural and spiritual community. With Scorpio, business and political enterprises flourish, and with Sagittarius, philosophy, printing, long journeys. The night force reaches its apex of power with Capricorn, symbol of the state, the organized social whole. The natural result of the action of the night force is to emphasize all values relative to the society. Personality and society, I'm not going to read the rest. You can read the rest of that. So just look at the terminology that was utilized, and then this next handout, we won't be able to get through totally today, but this will. We'll go back. Okay, this is
How many pages are in the camera?
this all stapled together.
You got one that's not stapled? You got one single sheet.
Okay, here it is. Here's the whole thing.
This is a two-part, but I'm just getting this one part. The other one gets into talking about, you have two, well, we get the first paragraph. The true meaning, the meaning of true initiation. It says, we have seen in the preceding lecture that the Christ self, the soul or the spiritual or divine self in the microcosm or in man. So to gain Christ consciousness or Heru consciousness or Horus consciousness or Krishna consciousness or Buddha consciousness is to evolve or elevate your consciousness or your thinking to the spiritual level. And that process was a process of initiation. And the ancients had developed a system of trials, of teachings, of experiences that if one was successful in going through those various levels of training and testing, one would learn to master their physical, their emotional, their mental, and eventually then merge with their spiritual essence within themselves and become illumined. And so in Stolen Legacy it talks about the mortals, the intelligences, and the sons, I can say now the sons and daughters of light, which are the 3 degrees of masonry: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. All that comes and talks about the same thing. One developing themselves to the higher level. So here it says, the Christ of the mysteries has 2 aspects: the mystic and the mythic. Okay? Man, know thyself. If you gain knowledge of yourself, you gain knowledge of the universe. In the mystic, the microcosm man, the Christ of the mysteries, represents the second aspect of the divine spirit experience, which is also reflected in the human experience. And it talks about how the light is born, it grows, it is crucified, it resurrects and ascends in you. So it says here, the Christ, the macrocosmos of the cosmos, the Christ of the mysteries represents the logos in his manifestation through the second aspect. So the 3 aspects, which we can, it's in here, it's in another one. The 3 aspects, remember I talked about the higher triad? Yeah, well, 7. I don't want to go there because it takes us too far. I want to kind of share this with you. Language that has been given out to the world that is actually guarded secrets that defines the facts of the true spiritual initiation. And only if you are initiated to be able to decipher that symbolism will you really be able to interpret what it's really talking about. So it says the solar or sun myth is the popular teaching concerning the cosmic mythic Christ, the Christ of the solar myths or legends. A myth, we must remember, is not mere fiction. It may be truer than written history. It is a great truth embodied in a pictorial form. Now, they're not talking about fable, they're not talking about stories in myths, or actually cosmic truths embodied in pictorial form. All symbols were employed by initiates with a definite meaning. We need therefore to know the true meaning of the symbols in order to read the true meaning of the myth. The solar myth sets forth primarily the activity of the Logos, the mythic Christ in the universe, which is represented by the sun. The sun is not the actual Logos, but is a representation of the principle of creation. The sun is not the creation. It is only a physical expression of the principle of creation. The same way a tree is not the source of the food, it represents the process, or the mother represents the giving of life, but she is not the life. The life is expressed through her. Again, the difference between the symbol and the fact. So that's why they say that black people worship, or Africans worship trees and rocks and snakes and water. We're not worshiping trees, snakes, rocks, and water. We were acknowledging the principle that they represented. Right. Well, they misinterpret stuff, so they come late and misinterpret stuff. So you have to think. This story of the sun god then is of utmost importance. It begins with his birth at the winter solstice, after the shortest day of the year, in the early morning hours of December 25th, as the sign Virgo is rising above the horizon. We're back to, I took it off the board, but we're back to understanding the dynamics of horizon and zenith and ecliptic. That's why it's so important to understand astronomy and mathematics. That's why our people can't understand certain things, because we don't have a fundamental knowledge of the sciences.
That's right.
In ancient traditions, science and religion was united. You can't have profound, in-depth spiritual knowledge without scientific knowledge. But yet we run from science. Ain't nothing but a mind game with a trick bag, you know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Really.
That's right, Shaq.
And we think we are players and we've been played.
That's right. Teach.
So it says, he is thus born of a virgin who remains such after giving birth to her son child. For the celestial virgin is still unchanged. In the ancient drawings, Virgo of the zodiac is represented as a woman suckling a child. Here we find the origin of the symbol of the Madonna. But what was represented in the cosmos was also reflected on the earth. So that's why the literal dynamics of the macrocosm is reenacted in the macrocosm. So you're talking about the original Madonna was the African woman suckling her child. Became the